All right, if you join with me in our sermon reading, Revelation, isn't that fun? Chapter 1, verses 8 and then 17 through 18, as we begin to look at these I am statements that Jesus made. And here Jesus sees John, and he says this, I am the Alpha and the Omega, says the Lord God, who is, who was, and who is to come, the Almighty. And when I saw him, John says, I fell at his feet as though dead. And he placed his right hand on me, and he said, do not be afraid. I am the first, and I am the last. Now, today we're going to be starting again this whole idea of this new series of Jesus' I am statements. But as we get started, we're going to kind of find a context for it and why those I am statements were so powerful for us. In the midst of this, hopefully we're going to get a new, fresh revelation of God to us and into our lives. And maybe even in the midst of, like we've already said, the chaos that's out there sometimes, to recognize that God is the center of it all, and God is really the first and the last, as he said, and just to be able to find the peace in the midst of that, be able to find strength in the midst of that, and our hope, and even our existence, and our meaning and our purpose in the midst of it. You see, this is truly an invitation from Jesus to get to know him when he lays these statements out. And all these statements are recorded really in a context where Jesus gets that opportunity to explain himself more fully and also to help us see where he can meet needs within our lives. Because to know Jesus is to know God the Father. Jesus says John 14:7, if you really knew me, you would know my Father as well. And from now on, he says, you do know him and have seen him. If you've seen me and the things I've done and what I've said, you've seen the Father, he said. That's a powerful statement in itself. So these I am statements could have been somewhat unsettling for the Jesus hearers in his day, because they would have immediately connected it to God's self-proclaimed name of I am Yahweh. And probably rightly so, because in John chapter 8, verse 58, Jesus is in an argument with the religious leaders, which happened periodically, you understand. And as he was arguing with them, they were talking about Abraham, and Jesus makes this statement to him. He says, before Abraham was or was born, I am. And they knew what he was trying to say. And so they picked up stones and they were going to stone him, but it wasn't Jesus' time, and he was able to just walk away. Jesus, it comes up to his time of being arrested, and the arresting party, the Romans, are coming to arrest him in the garden. And Jesus calls out and asks him, he goes, who are you here for? And they said, Jesus of Nazareth. And Jesus' answer is, I am. Some of your translations will say, I am he, but that's not really what it is. It's I am. And when he says those words, I am, it says the arresting party literally drew back and boom, fall flat on their faces because they were in the presence of God. Now, would you have been wanting to arrest him after that? Probably not, but they still did. Jesus is arrested. And he's standing at trial before the Sanhedrin, the religious leaders, the religious part of the trial. And he won't answer any of their questions. And finally, they said, would you just answer one? Are you the Messiah? And Jesus says to him, I am. And you're going to see me sitting at the right hand of the Father and coming in the clouds. And the high priest tears his clothes and says, this is blasphemy. And they begin to spit on him and beat him with their fists, it says, because of his words that he spoke. See, Jesus was very clear he was the Messiah. He was very clear. He said, I am God in your presence so that you might know God. A major point of this series that we're going to be looking at is I want us to see where Jesus' self-revelations, as he says, I am, how they meet our deepest needs. It's really Jesus' invitation to say, get to know me and know me deeper. It's about relationships and our relationship with God. And it should have a deep impact in our relationship with God. But in order to understand these I am statements, we have to go back. And we're going to get a little history today. We're going to see it in its context. You know, as Jesus makes these statements, the persons who heard him would have almost certainly taken a leap back to an Old Testament story that was very familiar to every first century Jewish person. And that story is the story of Moses and the burning bush in Exodus chapter 3. Now, Moses is out tending flock. Remember, he was raised in the palace there in Egypt. He's no longer in the palace. He's now out in the wilderness area, and the Exodus hasn't happened yet. And he looks over and he sees this burning bush. And so he goes to check it out, and God says, whoa, buddy, wait. He says, this is holy ground, wherever God's presence is. This is holy ground. Take off your sandals. He takes off his sandals, and God says, I've got a job for you. You see, you're going to lead my people out of bondage here, and you're going to lead them to the promised land. And of course, Moses, like most people, says, God, I'm inadequate. I can't do this. And God says, I'll be with you. It's okay. We're going to do this thing together. And then Moses begins to think about it. He says, well, you know, when I go to say God sent me, who am I supposed to say sent me? I mean, what is your name, God? And God begins to give him this name, this amazing name. See, the Exodus generation were slaves in a foreign land. They had only heard tales of a God from their ancestors. They didn't really know God or who God was or who God wanted to be for them. In fact, in Exodus chapter 6, verse 3, in 2 and 3, here's what God says. God says to Moses, I am the Lord. You see, I appeared to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob as God Almighty, or as we know as El Shaddai. But by the name, the Lord I am, I did not make myself known fully to them. See, God's ready to give us a fresh new fullness of the revelation of all that he is, his nature, his character, himself, like he's never done before. It's God's invitation to say, get to know me. I'm the God who is present and active, and I'm acting in history, and I'm acting in your lives, and I'm acting in this whole experience. Is there anybody here who maybe could use a fresh, new revelation or invitation from God to say, get to know me better? Anybody? This is our chance these next weeks right here to get to know God and allow God to meet the needs, the deep needs that we have so that we can move forward. So God's answer to Moses is this: I am that I am. Go tell him, I am has sent you. You see, in the original language, the Hebrew, it's a verb of being, an indefinite article, and a verb of being. It means I act, I cause, I make things happen, then you know me. See, it's God's invitation to know him, especially through God's actions, through God's interactions with the world and with people and situations. In fact, what he's saying is that just in a very short time, you're going to see this thing called the Exodus, and I'm going to do amazing acts, and you're going to know me because I've acted and interacted with you in history. And then beyond that, there's going to be this time in the wilderness, which they didn't really know was going to happen, but it happens, and God says, I'm going to be with you there. I'm going to do amazing things. I'll be a pillar of fire at night leading you. I'll be a cloud during the day, and you're going to know me because of my actions. And then you're going to settle into the promised land, and I'm going to do amazing things, and you know what? You're going to know me better because of my actions. I act, I cause, I make happen, and then you know me. That idea, that verb, I am, means to be. It expresses existence. I am the God who is present with you and all-powerful to make things happen. I am the one, are you ready to hear this? I am the one directing this whole thing, even if you don't see it. Like the scripture we read earlier today from Isaiah 43, God says, you are my witnesses of this thing. I am God. Even from ancient days, I am he. No one can deliver out of my hand, and like the way he says it, when I act, who can reverse it? I'm the one with all the power. You get to Isaiah 44:6. This is what the Lord says, the King and Redeemer, the Lord Almighty. I am first and I am last. Apart from me, there is no God. We're going to talk about that first and last in just a minute. Or even Isaiah 46:9 and 10. He says, remember the former things, those things of long ago? I am God and there is no other. I am God. There is none like me. I make known the end from the beginning. Are you hearing this? What he's saying is from the very beginning, I'm already letting you know what happens at the end. You know why? Because I'm a God of purpose. I'm in control. I'm directing this thing, and I have a wonderful, beautiful conclusion I'm leading it to. And the same thing, he says it again. From the ancient times, I'm letting you know what's still to come. I say my purpose will stand, and I will do whatever I please because I am God. A God of purpose, a God who is creator, a God who is all-powerful. God says it begins with me, it concludes with me, and when I act, nothing can stop it. Now, sometimes I think we live in this world, you know what we think it is? Out of control, don't we? It's craziness out there. It's chaos. Random things happening, and we feel like we're just lost in the midst of all this chaos and things taking place. Anybody here ever feel kind of lost and without a purpose in the midst of all that's going on in the world? Kind of feel like Kansas, his old song, Dust in the Wind, that fatalistic song. All we are is just dust in the wind blowing along, right? Things are not the way I want them to be. They're not the way they should be. Nations, rulers, confrontations, natural disasters, craziness, there's pain, there's suffering, there's injustice, there's disease, there's death, there's just this life that we're living. And yet I believe right in the midst of all of this, you know what God says? I am. And I am in control. And you can trust it. And you can rest in that fact. And if you just look to me in the midst of it all, you will find that purpose and that meaning and everything that you're needing within your life. I am. You look like Psalm 46. It's a great psalm. I speak of this psalm oftentimes when I'm doing funerals. God is our refuge and strength and ever-present help in our time of need. Therefore, I will not fear. Refuge and strength. But you see, the psalmist goes on and begins to talk about all these earth-shattering events that are taking place. Commotion and chaos. Literally earthquakes and mountains are falling into the sea and there's tidal waves. And in the midst of all of this, God speaks right in the middle of it. He says, be still and know that I am God. Anybody out there in the midst of craziness and commotion need to just sit for a moment and hear God speak, be still and know I am God. I'm in control. I'm directing things. I'm able to cause and make happen. Now, God is not saying I cause everything to happen, because we still live in a world of free will and choice, and people make good choices and people make really, really bad choices sometimes. And that's how it is. We still live in a fallen, broken, sin-cursed world, and yet in the midst of this, I think God is saying, I am still able to be sovereign and in control and leading and directing with purpose in the midst of even all this free will and choice that's happening. And I think we need to hear it again within our lives. God is not only creator, he's not only first and last, he's not only the beginning and the end, but God is sovereign and in control. And because of this, we now find our purpose in God. We find literally our existence finds meaning in God, because we were created to be loved by God and to love God. It's our destiny. So what's our point of need today? Every week we're going to talk about this point of need. You know what I think our point of need is? Purpose. Why am I here? What is the meaning of life? Who am I in the midst of all this chaos? And we have to remember that connecting point of God who says, I am. Now, I don't know about how many of you, but if you've ever seen the movie Monty Python, The Meaning of Life, anybody ever seen that one? I know there are, because I see people starting to laugh because you know what it is. The conclusion of the meaning of life from Monty Python is this. Well, it's nothing very special. Try to be nice to people, avoid eating fat, read a good book every now and then, get some walking in, and try to live together in peace and harmony with all people. Not bad advice, but I think it's deeper than that. I think it's more important and more powerful than that within our lives. I mean, the question is, what do we live for? What is our purpose and meaning in the midst of this existence? Are we supposed to just live for pleasure? Is that what we do? It's okay, but I don't think that's our purpose. Are we supposed to live for feelings and how I feel? And I should feel good, or I should feel good about myself. And as long as there's good feelings, then it's all good. Is that what we live for? Do we live for ourselves? Do we live for our own experiences? Maybe there is no purpose. Maybe we just live and that's how it is. We're born, we go to school, we work, and then we die. Is that what it is? Or is there more to it? And I think God is saying, I am. I'm the one you look to because I'm all in all. You look to me because in me you're going to find purpose and significance and identity, and you're going to find your destiny. And you won't find that looking in other places. And in the New Testament, I think this is how it's spoken to us, talking about Jesus. He is the image of the invisible God. Now, when it says the firstborn of all creation, that phrase literally means the beginning, and not that he was like created and born. For by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible, invisible, thrones, dominions, powers, authorities. All things have been created by him or through him, and, get this, for him. Everybody get that? You know why you were created? You know what your existence is about? You were created for God. Anybody missing your purpose anymore? There you are. This is who we are. The one who says, I am. And we find our existence and our meaning and our purpose in God. He's the center point. He's created everything. Everything revolves around him, and it finds its purpose and its meaning in him. So here's Jesus' statement for us today. Revelation 1, 8, and 17 and 18, and he repeats it again in Revelation 22, 13. Now, understand that John has recorded all these I am statements of Jesus, and he puts them in his gospel. But as John heard them, Jesus was walking with him in his human form here on earth. They were just human beings walking. Okay? Now, John is caught up in this vision of heaven, and the risen Jesus comes to him, and it says that he collapses as if he were dead in Jesus' all-powerful presence. So this one person that John related to is person to person. He used to walk with him. He used to talk with him. They'd hang out together. He could touch him, put his arm around him. This was his buddy right here on earth. They were right there. All of a sudden, he gets to see the fullness of the presence of Jesus, and what happens? Man, he falls down as if he's dead in Jesus' presence. That's how powerful it is. You see, the Almighty is there. The context is he's in the full glory of Jesus in the heavenly realm, and he's caught up in the fullness of time and history and purpose and existence. And Jesus speaks these words to him. I'm Alpha and Omega, first and the last, beginning and the end. I'm the God who was, or who is, and who was, and is to come. You see, I'm present. I'm the past. I'm the future. I'm the God who's always there. I'm the God who's present with you now. I'm the God who goes with you and moves before you, even when you don't even recognize it. Where do you need a fresh vision like John saw today of Jesus? Maybe our lives is like, hey, we've been hanging out with Jesus like John was, and now all of a sudden Jesus shows up and says, there's a little bit more of me that you haven't really seen yet. Let me reveal it to you. And John goes, woo, and he writes it down for us. Maybe we've been kind of casually walking along with Jesus thinking, oh, this is good stuff, and all of a sudden Jesus says, I want to reveal a little bit more of myself to you. Are you ready for that? Are you ready for that for your life and where that might lead us? That's what these I am statements are all about. You see, Alpha and Omega, they are the first and the last letter of the Greek alphabet. If Jesus came to us today, he'd be saying, hey, folks, guess what? I am A to Z for you. Does that make more sense to you? I'm the first and the last, the one who is and was and is to come. I'm the beginning and the end. I started this thing, and I'm going to bring it to a glorious conclusion because it's my purpose. You don't need to look any further than me. I'm the center of it all. All things find their purpose and their reason for existence in me because they were created not only by me, but they were created for me. And I have a purpose for this and for you and for everything that's going on if you'll just connect to me and find it, and we can go. Everything good you could possibly hope for is found in me. You don't have to look any further. You found it in me. See, what does that mean for you this morning? I am Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the first and the last. I'm everything. What does that mean for us as we're surrounded by people who have no clue that Jesus is Alpha and Omega, beginning and the end, the first and the last? What are we going to do with that? How are they going to know if we don't realize it in our lives, live it in our lives, and begin to share it with other people? See, life and history on this beautiful planet find its meaning in Jesus. And he's bringing it to a glorious conclusion. And he's able to do so. If you don't believe me, read Revelation 21. Jesus says, I'm going to make everything right again. And the old is going to pass away, and I'm going to make all things new. I'll wipe every tear from your eye, and everyone's going to see the full purpose of what this is. And then once again, Jesus will be the center in such a powerful way. And we're going to realize our existence is to be with Jesus. Paul Thigpen wrote it this way. I'll end on this. I won't talk forever today, don't worry. Paul Thigpen says, in saying this, Jesus is revealing himself as the very framework of history, the one who stands at its beginning and stands at its end, encompassing the whole thing within himself. When we ask, where did humanity come from? Where is it going? Jesus is answering, it began in me, it finds its meaning and its purpose in me, and it will end in me. See, Jesus didn't just make us. He is moment by moment our very source, the ground of our existence. In him we live and we move and we have our being. And it's in this relationship with Jesus that we find our purpose and our meaning and our hope and our direction and our rest and our strength. Even when things seem completely out of control, Jesus says, I am right here. I am. I am. As we finish this, Revelation 4, just a few chapters beyond where Jesus spoke those words, John begins to see this, a deeper picture of heaven, I guess you would say. And he sees the throne. And around the throne, he says, there are these beings who day and night never stop singing this phrase, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty, who was, who is, and who is to come. And when they sing those words, he says, around the center of it all, this throne, he says there are, he called 24 elders, he calls them. But the reality is most theologians, most people who study the book of Revelation, and they think that the 24 elders represent humanity and God's people. And so every time they sing this phrase, holy, 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 it's the one who is and was and is to come, man, they just fall, boom, flat on their face, and they lay their crowns before the throne. They're saying, you are the one, you are, I am, okay? And then they say these words, you are worthy, O Lord and God, to receive glory, honor, and power. For you created all things, and by your will they were created, and they have their being, their existence. Do you imagine that day will come when we can go do that? Where that will be what our life is about, recognizing that? But until that day comes, we're here in the midst of this chaos, right? What do we do with it? The exact same thing. We recognize you are my all in all. And we pour out our lives before God, the center, the reason that anything exists. And we surrender ourselves to him. See, Jesus' invitation to know him as Alpha and Omega meets a very deep felt need within us about our reason of existence and purpose. To know him, to know that we were created by him, for him. And as we deepen that relationship with God through Jesus is when we begin to step into the things God wants us to step into to live the fullness of life that he's prepared for us.